Don't cry because
No,
the
it's
Pac-12's over.
Ugh, that does suck.
Smile because the Washington Huskies happened.
Yeah.
Smile because it happened, because Washington, among all of the uncertainty that we're going to discuss here this evening, Washington is absolutely going to the college football playoff. 13-0. They beat your Oregon Ducks by a 34-31 score. They are undefeated in the last ever season of the Pac-12. They got a great win on Friday night in Vegas, and they're going to the ship, man. They're playing for the ship.
Yeah, they're going to the playoff. Yeah.
And we both were wrong. We both said that we thought Oregon was going to win this game. You were a little bit more confident about it than
True.
I was. I at least had Washington plus the number. You felt pretty adamantly that Oregon had enough momentum going into this game that these were essentially ships passing in the middle of the night.
True.
Washington going in one direction, Oregon going in another. And we talked a lot about vibes on the preview episode, the killer instinct vibes, the close win vibes, like all of these factors that we considered, and we came out with Oregon as our eventual straight up winner. And what happened?
Well, first of all, you nailed it. That Washington went 13-0 for a reason. They're a very, very good team. And, you know, I specifically talked about how I thought it was an advantageous moment for Oregon, given the close calls. Washington, with however many straight games with single-digit wins for a team to be this successful. I think it was 9 straight, something crazy, 8 straight, 8, whatever that number is. And, okay, specific to this game, Washington came out making plays on offense. They came out moving the ball. They came out running the ball. They came out looking like the clear, more complete team in this game, which they proved themselves to be over the course of 4 quarters. You look at what Dillon Johnson was able to do. You look at what Michael Penix was largely able to do in this game. I mean, he had an incredible number of absolute dimes, absolute perfect passes, which he's shown over the course of the year, but seemed to be slowing down over the back half of the season. You know, after that USC game, whether it was against ASU, whether it was against Oregon State, whether it was against Wazoo, it seemed like the way Oregon had progressed on defense and the way Washington had been playing down to opponents, and maybe Washington just is what their opponents are, and they're just gamers, and they can do enough to win. They have a coach who has exclusively won everywhere he's been, especially as a head coach. And so what Washington was able to do, they were able to neutralize Oregon up front, the Washington offensive line. They were able to get a ton from an injured, by the way, Dillon Johnson on the ground, and then a healthy Jalen McMillan who didn't play against Oregon. I don't even think he suited up against Oregon in that first matchup. So you have 2, if not 3, killer receiving options for Washington out wide, which they didn't have that first matchup. And they jump out to a very comfortable, commanding lead. Oregon goes 3 and out 3 of their first 4 drives, I believe. You can fact check me on that. I think it was a field goal was the one that was sandwiched in there. And you can't do that against an offense that's operating. And so what Oregon wasn't able to do, they were not able to establish the run really at any point in the game. A couple longer runs, one big one from Bo Nix. But the story of this game was how complete Washington was. Washington rose to a bunch of big moments, especially in the red zone. Oregon rose to a bunch of big moments as well. Made this a game. Absolutely, Oregon won that middle 8, right? They score right before halftime. They score right coming out of halftime. And I think at that point, it's 20-17. There are weird plays on Oregon's side, right? A DB for Washington falling out of bounds and then jumping back in towns in the perfect moment to intercept a Bo Nix pass. And then you have a reviewed Michael Penix. Is his arm coming forward? Is it not? On a fumbled call on the field, and then it's reversed as I think his arm was slightly coming forward. So it was the right call, but, you know, a millisecond the other direction. It's Oregon up 4 with the ball in the 4th quarter. Washington played more plays, made more plays. Washington was and is the better team. They beat this Oregon team twice this year. Yeah. There's not much of a hill I can stand on at this point, as confident as I was going into this game. Washington, on a neutral field, after playing a couple of down games, came out more prepared, more ready, and is absolutely the team between these two teams that has established itself to be of playoff caliber. And the way they closed out this game, right, that, you know, it's Oregon goes down the field to get within 3. They need a stop with a couple minutes left. Washington closes it out. Oregon has those opportunities to get stops and close this game out up in the 4th quarter, and they don't do it. Washington has the opportunity to do it just like they did the first time around, and they got it done. Dan Lanning has now lost 3 straight to Washington, And until proven otherwise, and they're now going to be rivals at the end of the season in the Big Ten, Caleb DeBoer and Washington own this rivalry. And I have nothing but good things to say. And if you force me to pick this game again, I'd probably still pick Oregon.
Well,
because I'm stupid, Ty.
Look,
but Washington is the clear better team.
Washington won this game in the trenches.
Yeah.
They won this game in the trenches. Their offensive front set the tone for Dillon Johnson, who ran for $152 and 2 touchdowns, 5.5 a carry. Washington was 10 of 15 on third downs. It just really struck me that Oregon, for its physicality, for all the physicality that we talked about with its defense, they couldn't get Washington off the field.
No.
They couldn't get them off the field. And, you look at the box score after the fact. I mean, it really did feel like Washington controlled the tempo of the game. They finished with 15 more minutes of possession than Oregon. And if you watched the game, again, it really, truly felt that way. I'll close with this. I mean, I think you pretty much summed it up.
And part of that is Oregon did score quite quickly on a couple of those touchdowns, which does affect things. Oregon also, and look, everybody's beat up. Everybody's dealing with injuries. That's why you build up depth. Oregon, without one of its starting corners, they lose a starting defensive lineman early in the game. Washington was without guys that first time they played. Everybody's beat up. Everybody's hurt. You got to make plays. Washington made more.
Let me close with this because I think you did a pretty good summation of the game.
Yeah.
For all the talk about Michael Penix Jr. and how he's looked out of sync down the stretch, his shaky moments in this game were far outweighed by the dimes that you referenced earlier, whether it was to Jalen McMillan or Odunze, Jalen Polk. Oregon hurried him 13 times in this game. They sacked him twice. They did generate some pressure, but they only forced one punt the entire game. Washington had a really good scheme, a really good game plan coming into this one. And I think, what excites me the most now in this reality where Washington is going to play in the playoff against somebody, and we're going to talk about that momentarily, I promise, we're going to see a true contrast in styles. Washington is going to be a different team than almost anybody else in the college football playoff. And how their offense holds up against what figures to be some very, very good defenses that they've got in front of them, I think will be extremely interesting to watch. Kudos to the Washington Huskies for punching their ticket to the final college football playoff, the final 4-team college football playoff.
Should mention the game-winning touchdown for Washington was the play in which, I think this is their third-string tight end, Quentin Moore, shows block, leaks out for like a 2-yard little touch pass. 100% success rate in football. When your tight end shows block and then leaks out, 100% of the time, and I'm always screaming about this as an Oregon human, for Oregon to run this play, good for Washington for running it in that moment. Of course it was going to work, and it did.